shoot. Fires from the top of the key and takes it home. The Liberty take a 2-point lead.
Welcome to Liberty FM, the podcast dedicated to all things New York Liberty. I'm Felicia, and I'm joined by my co-host and husband, Francois. This is episode 15, recapping a fruitful week for the Liberty with a comeback win in overtime against the Connecticut Sun and then a blowout win against the Minnesota Lynx. Francois, let's start with this incredible win against the third best team in the league, the Connecticut Sun.
Wow, what an incredible game that we experienced last week against the Connecticut Sun. I mean, we went through so many different emotions.
Yeah.
I don't think we expected the outcome, the way it did. Because let's go back into the first half, first of all, and how good Connecticut was on both ends of the floor. It really seemed like they scouted the Liberty really well because defensively, they were not giving a lot of space to the Liberty, especially Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu. Don't you think? I felt like it was really, really hard for the Liberty to play that game.
Yeah, they definitely smothered the Liberty on defense, I just think. And also, the Liberty got some open shots, and they just weren't going down. That also didn't help. But you can also tell that the Liberty were definitely looking like they came off a 5-day rest period, and they didn't look like as urgent as they should have been in this game. And I think Connecticut came out ready to play, ready to fight. And in the first half, Connecticut just showed more grit. They were just strong, on either side of the ball. And so I don't think the Liberty were quite ready. They didn't really seem like they had their heads in the game, in the first half. They looked a bit lethargic at first, and you were wondering kind of like, is this going to be tough? Or are they going to be able to come back? And, it was just a tough first half for them, but they definitely started to chip away in the second.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because those past few weeks, the Liberty have had a pretty hectic schedule. So you thought that, having pretty much like a whole week, to prepare and rest, getting back to New York, getting time for themselves, time to train, which is a luxury, nowadays with the crazy schedule in the WNBA, that it would be a bonus for the Liberty. But like you said, they were very sluggish to begin with, and I was like, what's going on with the Liberty? They need to wake up before it gets too late. But also, when you have players like DeWanna Bonner that got on fire in the first half from free, because it wasn't just pure luck or they have a good night. The Connecticut Sun were really setting good screens and had nice ball movement to create that space for frees. But DeWanna Bonner, at times, it's as soon as she saw a bit of space, and she was very far from the three-point line, she would just take it. So it's hard to say it's bad defense because you wouldn't necessarily expect. I mean, you could sort of expect DeWanna Bonner to take those shots, but still it takes you off guard. So, you got to give her props, how well she was shooting. But I was also and I think that's something that the Liberty have to figure out based on the matchup is they have this, obviously, they usually decide to switch on defense. But what I've noticed, the guards, especially Sabrina, sometimes Marine, they tend to go under the screen. Mm-hmm. And when you have a team like Connecticut that has, plays that set so nicely to create that space with, set of screens, and, you got guards that are very quick. You have, Lisa Thomas and Bonner that are physical players and also can be very quick as well. It is a dangerous game to go under the screen, and unfortunately, in this game, Sabrina got beaten quite a few times because you go under, that's it. That, you created the space already, and the Liberty got punished quite a few times on that. And so, I'm glad that, they decided to switch in the second half in that regards and just battle it out. Battle the screen, try to go over the screen, yes, they would still have a bit of space, but it would definitely be much harder for them to take that shot than if you just go under. So that was my concern in the first half. And then when you look at the second half, I mean, I think they were down by 10 or 12 at halftime. But then the third quarter, they were down by 20 pretty much.
Yeah.
At that very moment where everything was clicking for Connecticut, shooting threes, scoring on the inside, the Liberty not really showing any grit. Did you really think at that moment that the Liberty were gonna take that win? Because personally, I was like, oh, it looks like they're just gonna give up and just give that game.
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you saw a 20-point lead, that's still, I was hoping they could chip away at it. But once you hit 20 points, you're like, this is going to be a tight hole to get out of. And, the Connecticut Sun looked unstoppable, with Alyssa Thomas. She has some pretty spin moves, even on Stewie at one point.
Yeah.
Going to the basket. And Bonner, she just had a great night. She could hit from anywhere, from in that first half especially. And so watching them all play, you just felt like the Liberty couldn't catch up. They would try. They would have like a couple of points here. You might get a 3 bucket from Marine, and then Connecticut will hit you back with like a 10-0 run or just something. They would just go on a run themselves. And so it just felt like the Liberty just couldn't catch a long enough break to chip away at this lead until, later in the second half. And, overall, I think this was I was excited to see this matchup because obviously the Liberty are ranked number 2, and the Connecticut Sun are number 3. And also you have 2 potential candidates for MVP. So you knew this was going to be a grudge match for sure. And, initially Connecticut looked like, we're the better team. We came in prepared. We came ready. And the Liberty didn't look prepared. But the one thing I did like, even second guessing at that point, like, man, are they just going to give this game away? And it was just good to see the Liberty right around the 5-minute mark where, it started to slowly click. Like, they're not trying to give this game away. Just because they're up by 20, if we can just get it down. And I just kept thinking it too. And I think the announcers, and I think Sandy said it later, post game, if we can just get this in the single digits, fourth quarter, anything could happen. And I really thought that too. I was like, if we could just get this below 10, they got it to 10. And I was like, all right, we're going to go into the fourth quarter. Let's see. We could just keep chipping away. And it was spectacular to say the least. Because even with come the fourth quarter, everybody woke up.
Yeah. But let's go back to that 5-minute mark that you mentioned in the third quarter. Like Sandy Brandillo was asked after the game, like, what were like some of the adjustments that she made to make that comeback. And I think one adjustment that was pretty obvious was to involve Jonquel Jones.
Yeah.
Because like the first half, if I'm looking at the stats, in the first half she had 4 points and 3 rebounds. And then for the rest of the game, she had 17 points and 11 rebounds. So for me, it was kind of like the obvious adjustment that they needed to make because, look, Connecticut, they don't have Breanna Jones anymore. She's out for the season. And so they don't really have any other centers, really. They try to bring Attar, who's one of the tallest players in the league, in the first half. And she did a couple of good things, had a couple of baskets, but the problem with her is that she's very slow. And when you have a player like Jonquel Jones that, is so active and is much faster than you, it could work for a few minutes, but then after a while, you'll see that you're getting beaten pretty easily. So, Jonquel Jones was meant to dominate in this game and against a team that she knows really well. So I think for me, that was kind of like the obvious adjustment. But the one that I wasn't necessarily expecting is to have that small ball matchup lineup when she had Benaja at the 4 because she could use her physicality at the post. And then she went with the 3 guards, Sabrina, Vandersloot, and Marie Johannes. Now, we know that it's a matchup, it's a lineup that she hasn't used as much because usually defensively they get vulnerable.
Yeah.
But in that particular occasion, like that allowed them to play much faster and with more grit, and with Sabrina starting scoring threes, Marine also scored threes. They were much more dangerous, and in like 2 minutes they went from being down by 20 to being down by 10. And at that very moment, like once they were reaching that minus 10, you felt like you were more hopeful with potentially coming back in the fourth, right?
Yeah, I think, once you play a little small ball, they needed speed.
Yeah.
You could tell that Connecticut ran the floor and they were just faster and more aggressive. But I think as you saw, as the game wore on, Connecticut put in a lot of effort defensively and offensively, but they exerted a ton of energy. You could see it as the third quarter and as you got into the fourth quarter, just they looked a bit tired, but that's because they just played so hard the whole game and how much they were pushing in this game. You could see it. Like at one point, DeWanna Bonner, she just had to take a breath for a second, because, she's on fire, but you also don't realize, like, this is a lot of energy they're exerting. And so, I think it also kind of helped the Liberty to kind of exert their own energy at the right time. And that really helped them by Sandy doing that right in the middle of the third quarter. That started to give them some pace, and you started to involve JJ more, which is what you always got to do, because JJ, once you get JJ involved,
once you get her going, like, she's unstoppable.
Yeah, and so I think once they got to that, they were able to chip away, and they continued that into the fourth quarter. But I do think it's Sandy changing some things up, going with the three guards, and yes, it can be risky at times, but at that point, you needed speed. You needed to keep up with Connecticut because their guards were going everywhere. And with Marine in there for the Liberty, she's always on the move. And so that keeps things going. That keeps the ball moving. And so that was really helpful. And then, obviously Sabrina woke up, getting the threes, Jonquel getting the rebounds. And so it was really good just to see them fight and get back into this game and not give up. And that was probably, I would say, one of their best games this season, of that kind of comeback and grit and coming together and not giving up until the end of the game.
Yeah, I mean, whether you like it or not, there's been a lot of doubters about this team. Not necessarily like New York fans, but like people in general, like saying like, like on paper this team looks great, but do they have the grit? Do they have the winning mentality? When they face difficult situations to turn things around and get the win. And to be fair, all throughout the season, this team has shown that they have the mentality to win those, difficult games. We've seen comebacks prior to that game, against the Mystics, where at home they were down during the whole game and had this incredible comeback. Against Seattle as well, where they were down by 16 or 18. Games where it was pretty tight and they showed the resilience at moments that counted, that they were able to get the win and make those big shots. So at some point, like, people are gonna have to realize that this team could create something big this season, and they definitely give me more and more belief when I feel as a fan as well. I'm doubting. And it was interesting because Sandy Brandel, after the game, like, she was asked also what did she say besides obviously trying to find ways to make the team successful in that game. Like, what did she do, especially with players like Sabrina, to help them shifting their focus and the way they play? And she just said, like, I just said to Sabrina, like, you need to wake up, like, we need you, like, we need your scoring points. And in the fourth quarter, when it mattered, like, Sabrina responded. Like, she scored a couple of incredible threes, especially one in the corner with 33 seconds left that brought this game back to a 3-point game. So at that very moment, like, we were very hopeful for the Liberty to, potentially make a crazy comeback. And unfortunately, this comeback was made possible I would say unfortunately because she's a player that we adore. Becca Allen, the former New York Liberty player, who at this point was having an incredible game. Defensively, she was everywhere, making it really hard for Liberty guards. And also, she had quite a few threes in this game, especially in the second quarter, which created a big gap for the Connecticut Sun in the second quarter. But, they fouled a couple of Connecticut Sun players. And then by the time they got to foul Becca Allen, they were in the bonus, and so she was the one that was gonna shoot the free throws. And remember, I told you when it happened when we were watching the game that if there was one player that maybe the Liberty needed to foul was Becca Allen, because we've known her from previous season with the Liberty to be sometimes a little inconsistent at the free throw line. And then they were showing the stats showing that she was like a 70% free throw shooter this season. So that gave us hope. Obviously, in different circumstances, we would have wanted her to make those free throws because, we've came to adore her when she was playing in New York. But she did miss a free throw, and that really helps the Liberty to have some hope. And on the play that followed, they scored 2 with Breanna Stewart, and that was basically a 2-point game. And you would expect that the Connecticut Sun was probably going to give this time around the ball to DeWanna Bonner, but I don't know what happened. If
good old Sloot,
good old Sloot, that was putting a lot of pressure to Bonner, and she just turned the ball over. Next thing you know, Stewart grab that ball like her life depended on it. Give it to Sabrina. And Sabrina, she's not going to overthink it, twice. She's going to take that shot. And who fouled her at that very moment? Becca Allen. Oh my God. Everybody was gobsmacked. Everybody was in shock. You saw Big Steph that was in shock. The crowd was in shock. I looked at you, I was like, no way. It can't be happening. And so, initially I think they showed that there was 0.3 seconds, and then, looking at the replay, they gave 1 second, 1.4 seconds left on the clock. But if there was one player that you want to see at the free throw line with 1.4 seconds left and the possibility to either tie the game or get the win, it was Sabrina. And, I was like, man, she got ice in the veins. She's one of the best free throw shooters in the league. She's going to do it. But it's still hard, though. You need to have the mental strength with the fatigue and the crowd to make those free throws. She made the first one. You saw Marine on the bench getting excited. She made the second one. And then, I don't know. I always said the announcers jinxed it, the Yes Network. No. But she missed the third one, and the Liberty couldn't get the rebound, and, we were headed to overtime.
But I will have to say, just to go back, on that whole play started with Vandersloot.
Yeah.
And so, you got to give credit to Vandersloot. She does this at least one time per game in the last few games. Actually, Marine did it actually against Phoenix, where they kind of just wait. They're kind of just lurking right where they're about to make that inbounds pass, and you don't expect them to be right there. And that's essentially what happened with DeWanna Bonner. She got the pass. It's just that when she turned around, Sloot was right there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Sloot managed to tip the ball away at that point. I don't know. It didn't look like DeWanna Bonner had full control of the ball when she turned around. And so either way, with Sloot being there and being so close, she was able to get that steal and get it to Sabrina, which was a fantastic play. Obviously you would want that, you want it to go in, they just kill the game and it be done. But, with ice in her veins, she made 2 of 3. It went to overtime. I'm sure Sabrina was like, man, I wish I made that shot. This game would be over. But it did go to overtime. And then Stewie also woke up. I mean, she was waking up in the fourth quarter for sure. But, come overtime, it was pretty much, it
was Stewie time.
It was Stewie time for sure. For sure.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because when, the game, the fourth quarter ended, I was really wondering how this overtime was gonna play out, but we had the momentum, and you felt like the Connecticut players looked kind of gassed as well because they had put so much effort prior to give themselves a chance to win that game, and when it didn't happen, you wonder if that wasn't the final blow for them, and from the get-go, we dominated this overtime. Stewie got a free. Sabrina also scored a few times. You felt like, oh, that's great. They're taking control of this overtime and they're not, letting this momentum go. And so overall, I felt like we pretty much control that overtime, and the Liberty got the win. They got a 5-point win, 95-90, and that's the great thing this year is that you brought players with experience. You brought players that are used to those moments, that won titles before. Stewie, Stewart, Jonquel Jones hasn't won a title, but she played in 2 finals before, and so it definitely shows in those moments. Like, they're able to rally the team and get them going. I mean, when you're thinking about, the MVP race, it's really hard to define, what is the MVP or what are the criteria. But with Stewie that she's a winner, and she's gonna encourage the team to get going and give everything they have to get that win. And that's what happened in this game. I wasn't expecting such a comeback, 20-point comeback, but they did it. And now we're 3-0 against Connecticut in this season before the last matchup that would be in New York.
Let's go Liberty.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is one thing, a difference from last year to this year, is that, last year the Liberty would still fight. They didn't just give up if they were, down by a huge deficit. But you have more experienced players that can really rally everyone together. And, in Stewie, in Stewart, and especially in those two, I think. And then everyone else picks up. It's like Sad picked up, Laney and JJ. They all stepped up and they all played those minutes, and they played just tough basketball. And they needed to. They were lethargic that first half. Yeah. And just like Sandy said, they needed to wake up. And, this is not a game you just throw away. And, every game is important. And, I'm glad they finally saw that come the second half. And they started to chip away because they won each quarter after that. They lost the first 2 quarters. They won the remaining, third, fourth, and overtime quarters. And so for them, you could tell that they just had that fight and that drive that it doesn't matter how much we're down by. We're going to keep pushing. We're going to keep fighting until the end of the game, no matter what the score is. And I'm just glad they came out on top.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we forget that it takes time for a team to gel and find that chemistry, no matter how great the team looks on paper. And in a way, it's good that we have such a long season this year because it really allowed the Liberty time to figure things out, to gel, to find that chemistry. And there was one quote that I found very interesting. That was, Jackie Powell. She asked Vandersloot about, the chemistry that she's starting to find with Marine Johannes as well, because obviously Sloot and Sabrina are the starters, and they had to figure things out in the starting lineup. But Marine is also a key piece to the team, and she has to play either with Sabrina or Sloot. She's obviously more familiar with Sabrina, but I felt like she needed to still figure things out with Marine. And so this is what Vandersloot said after Jackie Powell asked her the question about that chemistry, and she said that I think it's just takes some time to build that chemistry. Like, they play against each other in Europe, but they never play together. So we know that we were playing kind of maybe 2 different paces at one time early on, and we just had to take time to figure out how each other's styles benefit each other. Some games we play more together, and sometimes we're not spending much time together. But I think we've been able to find our rhythm and our way more comfortable with what times and position. Marine needs the ball, and I think that benefits everyone. And, we gave a bit of a hard time to Van der Sloot in the previous podcast. I mean, not necessarily a hard time, but we're kind of worried. But we sometimes forget how smart those players are. They've been playing this game for so long, and Sloot, her mind functions differently than anybody else because she sees things so quickly. If she makes a mistake, she's not the kind of player that is just gonna linger too much on it or continue to make those mistakes. She's gonna look at it and rectify it. And in that game, she was the general that we know and love. And I feel like it's gonna also be beneficial to the team, that chemistry with Marine. And overall, I feel like the Liberty, in those past few weeks or past months, they figure things out, and that makes me really hopeful for the playoff, regardless of who they're facing, that they will figure things out and they will not let anybody dictate the tempo or the game. So great win overall against Connecticut, but no time to linger too much about that win, because 2 days later we were facing Minnesota in Minnesota for the second time in Minnesota, and third time overall this season. And what can we say? I think the discussion about this game is going to be pretty quick, isn't it? It was Stewie time once again.
Oh yeah, just like we talked about a little bit about DeWanna Bonner getting on fire, in that Connecticut Liberty game. This time around for the Liberty, Stewie set the place on fire. Sure. And from the minute she stepped on the court, what can you say? I felt like, though, she kicked it into another gear. I really do, because I felt like, she fought in the Connecticut game. The games prior, I just feel like teams are just trying to double team her more, triple team her even. Like, the way they defend on her, it makes it harder for her to really, get her buckets. She can't get to all the positions. She can't get to all her spots, basically. And so, this game, she was getting to her spots and the team was rolling. They played with pace, and so she was able to get open. And even at times where she didn't look that open, she was still making threes and giving some little heat checks here and there. And so it was just a phenomenal game for Stewie. It was a great game for everyone, really. Just with ball movement, and they just really set the pace from the start of that game. And so I think, from the Connecticut game, hopefully they just realize, we got to keep our heads in the game and stay locked in from the moment we step on the court. No matter how much time we've had off, we got to get back in this. We got, a few games left till the end of the season, and then playoffs start. So this was definitely a great win for the Liberty going into this next week. And what more can you say about Stewie?
I mean, I wonder sometimes if this MVP race, the players look into it as well, and without saying anything to each other, let their performance speak for themselves and try to challenge whoever's in the run for MVP to see if they can do just as well, or if not better. Because a couple of, recently Asia Wilson just tied a record for the most points in the history of the WNBA with 53 points. And so when you saw Stewie in the first half, you're like, is she gonna go for the record, tie it or beat it? She was on the court. She scored 6 threes in that game, which I think ties a record for the most threes in her career. Let's not forget, we forgot to mention that the game in Connecticut, she beat the Liberty record for the most points in a regular season for a Liberty player. So she's a scoring machine. But we felt lately, like you said, that her shooting percentage in the last few games was probably not as good. Sandy Brandello said that, to be fair, she feels like she's getting double team or triple team even more this year with the Liberty than she was with the Seattle Storm. So, Stewie has to figure things out. But great players, it usually doesn't take them too long to figure things out. And unfortunately, Minnesota was on the receiving end of that, and it was just incredible. But it wasn't just Stewie, like you said. It was a whole team effort. The defense was awesome, very tight. Minnesota was suffocating every step of the way. They had so many turnovers in that game, which was sometimes on their on account, but most of the time is because of the pressure that Liberty was putting on Minnesota. And then Sabrina, you've been asking her to shoot those mid-range shots or those little floaters to avoid getting blocked. She did that. Breanna, she was scoring. And let's just remember that, Marine for that game, Marine Johannes was not playing. She got a little injured. Her Connecticut Sun player stepped on her foot in the fourth quarter of that game. And so she was questionable and ended up not playing because I'm sure they want her to be ready for that game on Monday against the Aces. But, without Marine, we were still able to figure things out. And what was interesting was that, it got to a point where the Liberty even had a 43-point lead in the game. I mean, I've rarely seen that before. But it allows the bench players to get a lot of minute times. And at some point you were wondering, is Sandy going to let, Stewie on the court? Because at the end of the third quarter, she had 38 points. She only needed 15 points to score to tie the records. And you're like, it's more than doable. But I think it was wise, don't you think, to have Stewie on the bench for the fourth quarter?
You have to. I mean, once you're in these double-digit leads, if the lead was only like 10, 12 points, I think Stewie obviously would have remained on the court. Because, again, we're in the land of the three-point ball now. So, three-point balls, even if it's a 15-point game, I still think Stewie would have been out there because if somebody decided to get on fire with threes, this would be a very different game. But they had, 30-plus point lead at that point. And so, there was no need to keep Stewie out there. You want to rest her because come Monday, you have the Aces back on your home court. So, it was just good to see Stewie just get those points, get in her bag, do her thing on the court, and everyone else just also stepping up and doing what they could do too to really affect this game. Even Sabrina, you saw Sabrina go into the hole a few times. She had a floater. It was just great to see, just seeing Sabrina up her game and seeing her game evolve from she's not just a three-point shooter. Clearly, she's not just a three-point shooter. And she was defending well. I think with all the preparation she did in the preseason, this past season, I think it's paying off for her and it's paying off for everyone. So much so that by the fourth quarter, you pretty much just had the bench and Sloot for part of the fourth, and then eventually, who would have thought that Willoughby would be the point guard at one point?
Hey, if you had told me that at the start of the season that at some point Justin Willoughby would play point guard in the game, I would have not believed you. But it was what it was. I mean, at that point, there was really no point in putting the starters on the court, and I think the caution was big enough to have that very unusual lineup for the Liberty, because you had Willoughby as the point guard, you had Nyara Sabali, Stephanie Dawson, and Shu. For the first time since mid-June or end of June. My goodness. Yeah. I was not expecting. I was happy, but at this point I was not expecting her to having any playing time. But she did. And then you had, I think, Foreign as well was on the court. So very unusual. But I was happy that Anshu got some playing time and she got to play well and score some points. I think, Sandy was also asked about Anshu's minutes and her contribution to the game. And she said she really appreciated what Anshu did, considering that she had not played with the team for a long time. And during that stretch, the Liberty improved so much. And, they said that they almost play with a different playbook now. since the last time. So she was saying that she tried to keep it simple with Ionescu, but she wanted her to play a game, not necessarily force shots, 3-point shots, and just play a game, and she did it. Now, obviously, it's not necessarily a big significance, but at least when you look at the fourth quarter, the Liberty only lost the quarter by 3 points, which was great because they were able to rest the starters. The bench players were able to get some time, and it didn't feel as disjointed as sometimes it could be when there's 3 or 4 minutes left and you just put the bench player. It was a great effort overall, great night, and I want more of that. Maybe tighter games like Connecticut, but I'll take a 40-point game anytime. In the end, they didn't win by 40. They won by 38 points, but that was still pretty good anyway. And that was the last time we were facing the Minnesota Lynx until potentially the playoff. But I'm glad the growth that the Liberty have shown. When you look at the first game against Minnesota that they lost in New York, even though it was a back-to-back, it was still a loss regardless. The second game in Minnesota, I think we won by dozens of points, but the whole game overall was pretty tight and pretty tough. And so you look at that third game and this straight-up dominance from the Liberty, it definitely has shown growth. So I feel like we are ready and prepared for that game on Monday against the Aces, right?
Of course. This is, people have talked about it, these quote-unquote super teams, and, I've always said from the beginning that, the Aces, they're a well-oiled machine, and, they just looked, initially, to me, they looked unbeatable. I was like, this is going to be tough. But I think now when you see the Liberty, how much they've gelled, how much the system, how much they've bought in to play their roles and to step up and be in these roles that maybe for some, they weren't in those roles last year. They just bought in and they are here and they gelled and things are clicking. And I think, for the Liberty, they need to just continue to stay locked in, ride this momentum, because no matter what happens on Monday against the Aces, the Liberty are still a threat. It's not, the Aces don't look as unbeatable as I thought.
They lost this past weekend against the Washington Mystics, and so now we only down by 2.5 games, considering that the Aces have an extra game. If we beat them on Monday, we're only down by 1.5 games, and at that point, anything is possible to try to get that first spot.
I just think at this point, all the teams that really want it are stepping up, and it's going to be a dogfight from here on out. The playoffs are close. The Mystics, yes, they were plagued with some injuries. They're coming back. All these teams, there's a reason. There's only 12 teams in this league, and every team is a great team. And so they're going to put in that fight as we wind down the season. Everyone's going to come in and really try to put their best foot forward and play the best basketball they can. And so it's not going to be easy for either the Liberty or the Aces, and they play each other on Monday. I expect it to be a grudge match as usual.
What do you think is going to be the key in that game? Because I think everybody now is hoping for that very, very tight game, and I feel like I have a feeling that it could potentially be the closest game out of the 4 games they play in the regular season. What do you think is going to be the key?
For me, it is still Stewie and JJ. In particular, JJ, because you need those rebounds. You need someone in the paint. You need somebody that can get to Asia. Yes, the Aces can kill you in many other ways. You still got point guard over there at Chelsea Gray. So, and everyone has to play their defense. I also think Benijah is going to be huge
the
defensively.
Defense on Chelsea Gray.
The defense on Chelsea Gray is going to be just super important there. And again, people are going to get their shots. They're a great team. But if you can slow them down just a little bit, if you can run pace, if you can switch up and get them a little off balance, this game will be a game of runs. I do expect that. I think it's going to go back and forth. and they're gonna make the adjustments. But yeah, I still think if Stewie, if she can get around some of those double and triple teams, or just even getting it to her to the other players where they may beat you, you know, whether it's Sabrina, whether it's Sloot or Benijah, you know, or maybe Maureen will go off. Who knows? But I still think it comes down to JJ and Stewie. It's going to be important for them to have good games.
Yeah. I think personally that the key to this game is to slow Asia Wilson.
Yeah.
Because when we look at the 2 wins that the Liberty had against the Aces, they were able to make Asia Wilson's life very difficult with, you know, bad shooting nights, which was a combination of, you know, just an off night, but also the defense from the Liberty, you know, double teaming her at the perfect time, forcing her to take tough shots, being physical with her. For me, it's the key, because when you look at the stats, when I think both, like, you know, the game in New York where she, I think, scored only 12 points but was 2 for 14, the Commissioner's Cup game where she only scored 9 points and was 2 for 10, I think for me it's the key. Obviously, you know, they can still make it a game with Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, Kelsey Plum, but it starts with Asia. She's the anchor of that team defensively and offensively. Yeah. And if she has an off night, or if they manage to make her life very difficult, not that we can live with big performances from the other player, but I feel like the flow of the Aces is going to be disturbed. And we know that the bench is not necessarily as strong as the Liberty's bench, and they rely a lot on the starting lineup. So I think for me it's going to be the key. And like you said, I definitely want to see Benijah Laney on Chelsea Gray. Chelsea Gray had a tremendous game the last time around against the Liberty, and I had a triple-double in that Aces win. So I think if she can sort of reproduce a similar performance that she did in New York, where she was just, you know, suffocating Chelsea Gray, starting from the inbound, like starting right away, guarding her. And I like, there was an interview at the last game against the Minnesota Lynx with Megan Triplett on the Yes Network, where she was asking Benijah, where does this love for defense come from? And she's saying that, you know, she's always been into defense, but she also said that it's something that you can control, because obviously you're going to put the efforts, you're going to exercise in a way that is going to allow you to you know, have good lateral movements, to, you know, be, you know, there with your opponent every single time. And she felt like this is an element that I can control. The offense require more effort from her, and obviously even if you have a great technique, sometimes the shot is not going to get in, but at least with the defense, that's something that she can control and thrive in it. And so I definitely want to see a big performance defensively from Benijah. But we're also going to need to make shots, right?
Yeah,
you know, we need a great defense, but ultimately the wins that we got, the Liberty were able to make those shots when they needed it the most. And we're definitely going to give them that extra energy at the bucket. I mean, we haven't had a home games in like almost like 2 weeks and a half. So we're going to be hungry too. And make a lot of noise. The lower bowl is sold out. Hopefully the upper level will come and support as well. But we're going to try to make it as loud as possible and hopefully get that win and show the Aces that we there and we're going to compete for that title. So definitely looking forward to that matchup. Now, before we conclude that podcast, 2 points that I would like to discuss before we conclude. Let's do a quick heat check with the MVP race, because it's a three-headed snake, should I say, between Stewie, Asia, and Alyssa Thomas, in no particular order. All right, don't get offended. All right, but good luck figuring out who's gonna be the MVP, right?
I mean, they're all well deserving. I mean, obviously we are Liberty fans. We want Stewie to win. we think, I think Stewie should get it, but I also wouldn't be mad if Asia or Alyssa Thomas got it either, because it's well deserved. All three of them are having a phenomenal season, and so it's a tough one. This is either one. Now, if you pick somebody outside of that three, I'd be like, what? I'd be shocked, but I think those are your three. I think those are the top runners right there. Either one is well deserving, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, since the last time we talked about the MVP race, Asia scored 53. Alyssa Thomas continued to dominate on both sides of the floor. Stewie, despite a couple of rough shooting nights, continued to dominate as well and lift the Liberty. So good luck for anybody who's voting for the MVP, because that's going to be a tough choice. Yeah. You're looking at the stats. I mean, Stewie is the second best scorer in the league with 23.1 points, 9.2 rebounds, 3.6 assists, 1.5 steals. She's shooting almost 40% from the 3-point line, 46.5 field goal percentage. Considering that she takes a lot of shots, that's a very good percentage. She only has 1.6 turnovers when you think about the fact that she has the ball a lot on her hands. 1.6 blocks. I mean, those stats are incredible. But then, let's look at Asia Wilson. 21.9 points. So less points than Stewie, but slightly more rebounds. Less assists. She's not necessarily a player that, has a lot of assists. But I didn't know when I look at the stat that she just has as many steals as Stewie. The blocks is definitely a forte. She's one of the best blockers in the league. She doesn't take, obviously, a lot of threes, but she's so dominant on the inside, and everything starts from her. So it wouldn't be shocking if she got back-to-back MVPs and the third MVP trophy for her. And then Alyssa Thomas, what can we say? I mean, have you seen a player before that plays 40 minutes a game and doesn't look tired, and doing it day in, day out? It's just incredible. She can dribble with both hands comfortably. She passes like a point guard, and it's not a natural position. She makes the game easier for other players that allow players to cut to the basket. She will find that, little open spot to give it to other players. She'll grab rebounds. I mean, she had shoulder injuries that forced her to change, the way she shoot free throws. And she could pretty much shoot both hands. And so she wouldn't be a 3-point shooter, a mid-range shooter, but she will always find a way to get to the basket. I mean, we saw against Stewie and the Liberty, Stewie was on defense on her, and she struggled to stop her. So, she's got close to 16 points a game, close to 10 rebounds, close to 8.1 assists. So she pretty much has almost a triple-double on average, close to 2 steals. I mean, I try to be as concise as possible in terms of the stats and what they bring to the team. Let's not forget leadership as well.
Yeah.
I mean, should we split the trophy in 3 slices? Because I really don't know who's gonna be MVP at this point.
Yeah, I think as you read off the stats, you're just like, whew, geez, Alyssa Thomas stats, they are dominant, like you said. She's near a triple-double just on her stats. Yeah. So, it really is. It's going to come down to just kind of how you view an MVP. It's going to come down to, how you view that MVP and how they really affect the game for their team day in, day out. And they all affect their team in a great way. They really do. So it's just, I feel like it's just going to come down to preference almost, because all three of them are just well deserved of MVP.
I would say either preferences or standings. Let's not forget that, yes, I think that there's a certain level of bias when it comes to voting, because if you're a journalist that follow the Liberty or the Connecticut Sun or the Aces, you're probably going to be more inclined to vote for the player of that team. And then have you actually watched the games of the other players? So it makes it really like hard to figure out, how fair this voting is. So I would say that the last part of the season is about 6 or 7 games for most of the teams now left. Maybe that'll come into play. The way the Liberty finished the season, they have quite a few tough opponents at home, and they're also going to play in Dallas. That might come into play. The last matchup with the Aces might be important. So who knows if those things will come into play. But obviously we're gonna stick to Stewie. If we could vote, we'll give it to Breanna Stewart. But good luck for the voters. I would not want to be in your position. I mean, I would love to have the power to get a vote, but in this very moment, I think I'll leave it to you guys. Good luck with that choice. And so to finish, the last point I wanted to finish on is to kind of sort of project ourselves to the playoff. A lot of things at this very moment can happen. The Liberty could still be number 1 in the league, just as well as the Aces. It's getting now tougher for the Connecticut to get to that point, but it's still sort of possible. The lowest seed that they could finish is 4th. Those 3 teams, they cannot go below that. And then after that, from the 4th spot to I would say maybe the 10th spots, because now Seattle and Phoenix lost today, which eliminated them from the playoffs contention. So I would say from the 4th to the 10th spot, anything could happen and change. So let's look at the playoff format that changed last year. And so the number 1 seed would face the 8th seed. And at this very moment, that would be the Las Vegas Aces against the LA Sparks. And then in the other first round matchup, that would potentially face the Aces or the Sparks. It's the 4th seed versus the 5th seed. So at this very moment, it's Dallas against the Minnesota Lynx. And then on the other side, where the Liberty are at this very moment, as the 2nd seed, they would face the 7th seed. And right now, it would be a matchup between the New York Liberty and the Atlanta Dream. And then for the other first round, that would face the winner of that round. It would be the 3rd seeds against the 6th seed. So Connecticut against the Washington Mystics. So let's project ourselves in what would be sort of like the ideal matchups, or maybe some of the matchups that you would like to see. And I told you before we recorded the podcast, for me, ideally, I would love to have a first round between Connecticut and the Mystics, because I don't know for you, but I would be, even though I'm super confident about my Liberty and how they've been playing and growing all throughout the season, the worst matchup would definitely be the Washington Mystics in the first round. Because if you look at the team, the Mystics, with all the injuries they had, and now finally they're starting to have all their starters back.
Yeah.
And by the time the season ends, they will probably have had more minutes and more, and they will be more in shape. You do not want to face a team like that in the first round, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, what put the Mystics in this position is really just injury.
Yeah.
They're a great team, and they're a tough team, and they were tough for the Liberty. You know, I mean, the Liberty had to come back in that last game, weeks ago against the Mystics, but they lost the first game.
They lost the first game.
This season.
They won the 3rd game, but it wasn't easy. And they were missing Elena Donovan, Shakira Austin.
Yeah.
I think
You're
even
missing
Ariel
key
Atkins
players.
were. So they were missing key players, and they're still able to make it a game. So
yeah, so this is not easy. But again, once you get into playoff mode, you got to beat the best of the best. Everybody's going to come with their A game, so it doesn't matter.
I agree with you, but if you could avoid it in the first round, that would be great, though.
Yeah, it would be nice to avoid
Let them
that.
battle with another tough team, so that afterwards you could just face them, and maybe they're a little more tired, right?
I see your point. Yeah, I wouldn't want to face the Mystics right now. But again, playoff is playoffs. You just got to...
You got to beat everybody, right?
You got to beat everybody to get to the top. So, it's not going to be easy no matter who the Liberty face. These teams are good and they're gonna fight and they're gonna play with that grit. And the Liberty they have to stay locked in. Period. They can't, come off of a win or come off of this past week having 5 days off and being lethargic. That won't happen in the playoffs. I think once they get into a rhythm, back into their rhythm, I think they'll be just fine.
But even though, yes, like you said, and that's something that actually they mentioned a few times, the Liberty, that they don't really look at what other teams are doing. Mm-hmm. They just focus on themselves and what they need to do to win and improve. So I definitely give them props for that. They don't really look too much into what's going on outside. They focus on them. So I'm sure that would be their mentality coming to the playoffs, that it doesn't matter who we're facing. If we play our game and focus on what we need to do, we'll just, deal with it. But ideally, what would be your favorite matchup in the first round?
Favorite? I mean, I think...
Or the least favorable, because it's hard to say my favorite because, anything could happen, but...
I mean, the way it stands right now, I feel like, personally, I would prefer the Liberty to be number one. Mm-hmm. And to kind of have that side of the bracket. I think they'd have a better time. But, again, as I said, it's playoffs. You got to play the best of the best. I think if it were the way it went right now, they would play Atlanta. Yeah, I would definitely give the Liberty the edge, over Atlanta. Two out of 3 games. I think they can do it, obviously. They've played them a couple times this year and have done pretty well. I mean, Atlanta, though, is tough. It's not easy.
They're an inconsistent team. They're a young team. They've lost a couple of games lately. So we blew them up as well. So I think it would be an exciting matchup, especially, Ryan Howard, wanted to prove a point against the Liberty, and the Liberty kind of took it personally as well. So I think it would be a fun and exciting first-round matchup. But I do think that we have the weapons to, take care of business against Atlanta. So it would be a good matchup. If I had to answer at top of my head, I would say Minnesota because we just blew them up recently. And then the LA Sparks, which could also be a potential matchup. We beat them twice in LA. The second game wasn't easy. We'll face them very soon at home as well. But they're more on the come up, so it will actually be interesting to see if it's a more challenging matchup than we expect. But they're on the come up, so I would say maybe not right now. But definitely I would put Minnesota as my favorite matchup. Atlanta, which is the current matchup, as the second choice. And then maybe the Sparks as my third choice for the first round. But definitely not the Mystics. That's definitely something you want to avoid. Dallas, Dallas looks like they're going to get the 4th spot. But who knows? They don't have a big lead in the standings compared to the other teams. So that would be also a tricky matchup to have in the first round.
I mean, the rest of the season, there's only a few games left. But there's still a couple weeks of games. And between the 4th and 8th seed, it could flip in any direction. I don't foresee it flipping drastically. I think Dallas will probably remain where they are. But again, anything could happen right now. Again, Washington, they just beat the Aces. That gives them a lot of confidence to push and to win these games and, the upcoming games. So they could go up and, they might bounce up in the standings. You don't know. Yeah. So, yeah, it's going to be tough regardless. I'm just glad the Liberty are in the playoffs and we didn't have to grudge match it out until the very end, to be like, yeah, we made the playoffs. I think for them, they just can continue knowing that's already done. We're in the playoffs. We know what we got to do. We just got to continue to stay locked in and going about our game plan. And they've been doing that and being pretty successful.
Yeah, so it's going to be an exciting week ahead. Make sure you tune in to or go to the Barclays to root for the Liberty against the Aces on Monday at 7 p.m. Then they will face on Friday for the Caribbean night. Definitely looking forward to that. The Connecticut Sun for the final time this season at home on Friday. And then it will travel to Chicago on Sunday facing the sky for the last time this season. So pretty exciting week ahead. We'll be there and recap everything on our next podcast. And so, as we always say, Felicia, let's go Liberty!